Welcome to the Golden Quill. A place where old stories breathe again in the hush of the night. Here, each evening brings a journey, into the past, into forgotten memories, into whispers the world once left behind. Perhaps down a quiet street in Florence, or within a letter never sent, or in a moment so small, it changed everything. So take a deep breath. Close your eyes. And let the story find you. The Clockmaker of Venzora. Lorien hadn't built a clock in 30 years. Not since the night time betrayed him, or so he believed. Once the finest artisan in all of Venzora, he had become a ghost in his own workshop. They say it was grief. They say he blamed himself for what the hands of the clock could not undo. Elira had never met Lorien. But her grandfather once spoke of him in awe. She held out the broken timepiece, one that had stopped the day her mother died. "Can you fix this?" she asked. Not knowing, she had just wound more than a watch. He agreed, not for the coin, but for the question that lingered in her voice. As they worked together, something unfamiliar returned: conversation. Memory. Hope. For every piece she watched him adjust, she shared a story, of her mother, of silence, of wanting to hear ticking again. For Lorien, each gear turned a memory he had sealed shut. That night, Lorien opened the drawer he hadn't touched in decades. Inside, a letter he never sent. A locket he never gave. The memory of the child he once tried to save, and failed. The truth was never about clocks. It was about one moment, one miscalculation, and the boy who didn't make it through. When the tower bell rang, it startled birds from the rooftops. And for the first time in 30 years, Venzora heard its own heartbeat again. Elira had not just repaired her watch. She had repaired a man. And perhaps, a town. Time cannot be reversed. But it can be forgiven. And in a town that once feared its own clocks, the hands now moved not to count seconds, but stories. We all carry broken pieces of time. But sometimes, the act of mending is more powerful than perfection. A repaired watch, like a healed heart, ticks louder than ever. Because time, when shared, becomes something eternal. The Garden of Forgotten Colors. In the heart of an old Tuscan town, there stood a gate no one dared to pass. Generations came and went, and still it stood, wrapped in ivy, weathered by silence, guarding secrets only the wind could whisper. She was never one to chase legends, but the moment her fingers touched the cold brass key, something stirred, as if history itself had exhaled. The key turned, not with force, but with grace. And the gate, it breathed open, like a memory long buried finding voice once more. Inside, time had stopped, or perhaps, it had chosen to rest. The garden slept in silence, but it was not dead. It was waiting. Each stroke of faded pigment was a whisper from the past. And in those names, Aurori, Voridis, Colum, she could almost hear the heartbeat of the artist who dared to bottle the sky. She did not seek praise. But as her hands moved, color returned. Not just to stone or petal, but to hearts dulled by forgetting. She never signed her name. But the garden knew. And now, so did others. Beauty remembered is beauty reborn. And in that garden, memory had color once more. The true beauty of a place, or a person, is not measured by fame, but by the memories it leaves in others. In a world that often forgets, choosing to remember is an act of quiet rebellion. Art can fade. Colors may sleep. But as long as someone is willing to return, to care, to believe, even the forgotten can bloom again. Because what we nurture, lives on. Welcome to the Golden Quill. A place where old stories breathe again in the hush of the night. Here, each evening brings a journey, into the past, into forgotten memories, into whispers the world once left behind. Perhaps down a quiet street in Florence, or within a letter never sent, or in a moment so small, it changed everything. So take a deep breath. Close your eyes. And let the story find you. The Mirror in the Garden. Long ago, in the heart of Tuscany, a monastery stood surrounded by gardens. In one of those gardens, hidden behind tall hedges, there was a mirror, placed on a stone pedestal beneath an olive tree. No one knew who put it there. It had no frame, no signature, no story. Only a quiet reflection. The monks called it La Specchiera Silenziosa. The silent mirror. One monk, Brother Pietro, visited the mirror every morning before sunrise. He said nothing. He only bowed and looked. One day, a young scholar visited the monastery. Ambitious, confident, hungry for knowledge. He laughed when he heard the story. But out of curiosity, he went. He stood before it. And for the first time, his smile faded. He saw a younger version of himself. Alone, staring out a window. Waiting for his father to return. A father who never did. Brother Pietro stood beside him and said, "It is not magic. The mirror shows only what we carry, but refuse to name." From that day on, the scholar stayed. He worked in the garden. He read less. And listened more. Years later, when Brother Pietro passed, the scholar placed a single line on his gravestone. "He taught me to look inward, so I could finally see the world. True wisdom is not in what we seek, but in what we dare to face within. Reflection is not a surface, it's a surrender. And peace comes not from knowing more, but from understanding ourselves." In a quiet coastal village, where the wind carried the scent of salt and lavender, there lived a painter named Elio. He painted only at dawn. With one brush, in silence. Each morning, one painting, no more. His art lived everywhere. On chapel walls, shop signs. Even behind old wooden shutters. Children would gather and ask, "Why don't you sign your name?" Elio only smiled and said, "Beauty doesn't need a name to exist." Years passed. His work found its way into distant cities. Florence, Venice. Admired by nobles, praised by strangers. One autumn evening, a wealthy merchant arrived. "Name your price," he said. "I'll make you famous, in Florence, Venice, even Rome." Elio looked at the scroll. Then at his paint-stained hands. And said quietly, "If my art must be owned to be remembered, then I'd rather it be forgotten." That winter, Elio vanished. Some say he died. Others, that he walked into the sea. But when spring returned, a new painting appeared on the chapel wall. No one saw who made it. No name. No signature. Just light. And so, even without a name, his art never truly left. True value does not lie in fame, but in the mark we leave on the hearts of others. Humility can be a quiet form of glory. Art, like memory, can live on forever, even without applause. The Forgotten Gatekeeper. In the southern hills of Tuscany, where pine trees hum soft lullabies to the wind, there stood an old monastery, home to a library so vast, people said it could swallow time itself. Few remembered the gatekeeper. Not a monk. Not a scholar. Just Angelo. He didn't read. He didn't write. But he opened the grand doors. And he closed them. Every morning. Every night. For years, and years, and years. One afternoon, a young scholar, bright-eyed, full of words, asked, "Why don't you read anything? There are thousands of books here." Angelo smiled gently and replied, "If everyone reads, who will keep the silence?" Then came the winter night. Snow fell slow and soft. And a stranger arrived. A black cloak. 3 knocks. A quiet voice. "I haven't come to read. I've come with a question. In all these books, is there one that holds a soul?" Angelo didn't answer right away. He turned. And walked deep into the library. He didn't fetch a book. Instead, he touched the chair where thousands had sat. The brass candle holder. The old page, left open. And then he whispered, "All the souls are here. Not inside the books, but in those who read them." The stranger bowed his head once, and left. Vanished into the snow. The next morning, Angelo was gone. But the doors? The doors to the great library. They were always open. Even though no one stood there to open them. And so, the story fades into the quiet night. Rest well, and may your dreams carry the wisdom of forgotten pages.